edit this down, so it's all good. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
It's a good day to ask the big important questions.
Let's go to it.
Let's go to it. So, as you know, the theme of the Summer of Love is finding a path out of the darkness, finding our truth in spite of what's happening in the world. And when I first met you, you were on a path, and you'd had a lot of things that had gotten you on that path. And so you shared with me that you were in probably the lowest point of your life right before I met you.
Yeah, I was just crawling out of the rabbit hole at that point.
What was it like before the rabbit hole?
It was very lonely. Very unsettling. The loneliness was just overwhelming. My wife was very supportive, but she knew I had to deal with it on my own. Certain things she helped as much as she could, but it was really a sense of self that I didn't have at that time that I found. And
so just to set the stage, you're married, you've got grown boys, good kids, good life. By all outward appearances, you should be fine by today's society standards. And yet you had this disconnection from self and from life
others
and
just
others.
Just I don't know how deep we need to go on this bit. I was a seeker of truth, and truth was very important to me. And I've learned on my journey that everybody has their own truth, and everybody is trying as hard as they can at their own level of consciousness. Yeah. That right there alone helped me a lot, because if people weren't at the same level of consciousness, it drove me crazy, and I was judgmental. And that's no place to be. That's not healthy. Mm-hmm. That's not looking through the lens of love, as I've learned from you. And that just wasn't healthy. So
you were angry.
I was angry at everything.
At everything.
At everything.
And really going deep down the rabbit hole of trying to find truth and hold people accountable.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of...
and just the fact that, people didn't see what I saw. It just seemed like I was walking in a land of zombies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't see people that way anymore. But boy, just to show you where I was, just walking in the dark night, just as a zombie, just not connected to anything or anyone, really.
Yeah. So what happened? What something shifted, caused you to break a pattern in your life?
Well, the lowest of lows, where you finally hit rock bottom, where there's no more digging in that rabbit hole, and I'd hit bottom. I lost my business. I lost my house. The only thing I didn't lose was an IRA that I'd been investing in since my early 20s. And I thought, I'm taking this money out of this country before I lose it here too. And so I researched countries, and long story short, it just came down to Costa Rica was really calling. And
I didn't know this part of your story, that you wanted to go to Costa Rica to put your money outside the United States.
I wanted to buy foreign dirt.
Foreign dirt.
They can't take that away from me, right?
So that's how you ended up going to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
By yourself.
By myself, which I've never done anything alone. It's
made
either with
no
my
sense
wife
to anybody
or
else.
friends, and let alone to a country, that speaks a foreign language. So, I just, and come to find out later after I came back, I heard from somebody, not my wife, but somebody told me that Carla wasn't sure I was going to come back. I had no idea I was that that dark. I was, showing it that much. So yeah, that broke my heart, that to know that I
So
put her through that.
there's some language I'm going to introduce into this conversation because I hear it from people and they're always afraid to say it out loud, but there is this sort of we call it a suicidal ideation, suicidal. Had you reached that point where you weren't sure you wanted to be here?
I may have thought about it, but there's no way I would have done that.
Because of family.
Yeah. And just, yeah.
But it was hard to be here. Every day
It
was
was
hard.
It was hard to be here, especially when I was just so alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And every night just doing more research and digging down that rabbit hole that was just
looking for who to blame.
Yeah.
Who are the bad guys? Let's catch them so this world can heal.
Right.
Right? I mean, the intention behind
And it was the whole broad thing. Because really healing the earth or healing everything starts right here. It starts with yourself.
Right. But in the beginning, you were looking outside for the answer.
And there's nothing I could do to do any of that.
Yeah.
And so it helped. It felt hopeless, really.
So you did this wild and crazy thing. You go to Costa Rica with your pension in hand. And what happens?
Well, I've never been religious. I mean, I went to a Lutheran church, and the day I got confirmed, my mom said, "Now it's up to you if you want to go to church." So that was my last day in church. It just didn't fit with me. It just, I don't know. It was too organized. I don't know. So I'm at a beach watching a sunset, Dominical Beach, one night in Costa Rica. Probably I'd been there 3 or 4 nights, just enough to know that I really loved the country. It was beautiful. I was down in the rainforest area, the Southern Pacific, and walking along the beach, and I just looked down and I saw this perfectly round rock. And I'm a huge rock lover. And this rock, like I said, was perfectly round, about the size of a golf ball. And I picked it up, and it was like one of the most beautiful things I've ever held in my hand. And I found myself praying to it, wishing to it, and just asking for it to help me find a path to a place that I can heal, some property that I could find that I could love and nurture and maybe even share with others. And, I spent a good amount of time praying to this rock, and I don't know why, but I threw it back into the ocean. It was the most gorgeous thing I've ever held, and I threw it away. And I'm a rock lover. It should have gone on my desk where I could see it every day. But talking to a spiritual friend months later, he said, "Kent, you know what that means?" And I said, "Well, then I'm stupid that I threw away a perfectly good rock." And he said, "No, you gave permission to your guides to help you with what you wished for." And sure enough, they did. They found me. They led me to a place that I now call Corazon del Rio. A beautiful river and waterfall and swim hole. And I've built a beautiful place there for people are having retreats there, and we're getting great little testimonials from people about their healing or their memories that they're so
your healing path becomes a mechanism for other people's healing path.
And that's such a beautiful thing.
Isn't that?
So yeah.
So you decide to buy this property. I got to get the detail. And you go home and you tell Carla, I'm buying property in Costa Rica, and I'm going to build.
She knew that's why I went down there, though.
Oh, okay.
So it was on the charts, and so we did that, and
then
we built.
So you bought the property, and then what happened? You came home.
Well, so yeah, I came home, and I was walking with a friend who had just finished a rock garden, Ed, and I told him I love rocks, and he invited me to bring Carl over for, a glass of wine after work, and went there, and we're actually there till midnight. We just hit it off, but he and I walked out on his property, and he's got a ton of rocks out there, and we're walking around, and he showed me his rock garden and all that, and I started telling him about this rock that I threw in the ocean, and I've also got a lot of hawk stories. Hawks were following me around. That was obviously my spirit animal. And I was telling him all these stories, and he said, I've got an invitation for you. And that's when he invited me to Grace Sanctuary. And that was just one of the many things were just starting to come my way after that episode
anymore.
Of just, letting my spirit guides guide me, kind of surrendering to it all and just going along with it rather than, setting up boundaries and not allowing myself to do certain things. Or I don't know, it's really hard to explain, but that was the biggest invitation I've ever had in my life. I've done so much growing here, and I just love you and Stephen so much for what you do here. I mean, I've just recently, that story I just told you was 7 years ago, and I had so much shame in myself. And coming here to Grace, where you're supposed to, I feel comfortable, but I never could share that shame.
Yeah.
And it got to a point just several months ago, 7 years later, where I came here with intention.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to get this darkness out of here. Yeah. I'm done with it. Yeah. And
I use
my
the
brothers
phrase,
helped me out that night. And
yeah,
I released. It was
we
gone.
heal in community.
And it was actually so easy, Edie, to just let it go, because I was so, and it was like sand through my fingers. I let my darkness fall as a lyric to one of my songs. It was that easy just to let it go.
What made it easy when it wasn't easy before?
Well, it was the shame. It was the sharing. It was the not fitting in with, everybody's level of consciousness or whatever game monkey mind was going through that I just wouldn't be accepted anymore here.
So there was an underlying, I'm not good enough, I don't fit in, I don't belong.
Right.
And you learned that you do belong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I know exactly the spot in Grace Sanctuary where I did that. And just weeks later is when we started
Building Hope. Yeah.
So I felt like that release was the beginning of hope for me. And we were building hope.
We built hope together, didn't we?
So
yeah.
I feel like that's my next step, is that temple right there, Hope Temples. I'm going to do a lot more growing there, but I've grown so much here. I've grown so much. I love you for that.
Oh, it's, like I said, when we step into our healing, our shameless healing path, we open the door for so many people around us to do the same. There's no shame in this healing process. We all feel disconnected.
And I feel like what you just said, they need to come to you, right? I felt like I need to let everybody stand on a stone and tell everybody what was going on. And I just need to be my authentic self.
Right.
I've never thought I was that smart or well-read, but I've had people say that you're kind of cool because you're just, the way you speak, it's just, there's so much authenticity in that. So that really helped me with my self recognition and what I've done. And I know I've shared to you a little bit earlier that I was laying in bed one night listening about depression and suicide and just the darkness that I was in. And the person that was doing this YouTube was saying to really get out of that was you need to get out of your familiar surroundings by yourself, alone, and really get connected. And that's what I did without knowing, without reading a book,
you just intuitively knew.
Did it.
Yeah.
And so that night I laid in bed crying because I knew I loved myself at that minute. I don't know if I've ever could say that I ever liked myself. But at that minute, I was like, I did all that
Yeah.
for me.
For you.
You know, and I'm one that I love to do stuff for others.
Yeah.
But I've never focused on myself. And that's where it all begins. You've got to love yourself before you love others.
Right. Right.
So that was kind of the key to everything. Love of self is the key to...
Isn't it ironic? Isn't it ironic that we are so ready to love others, but the work of falling in love with ourselves is the hardest work?
And you know, I used to hear that.
It sounds very trite.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, give me a, you know.
Yeah.
When I heard that, but now I hear it's like the most important thing on earth is to love yourself. Yeah. Because that's the start of loving
exactly
everybody
as you are.
else.
Oh, that's it. You want that for everybody else because you find such peace in your life from that place.
Right.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who's going through that dark night of the soul? A sense that there's this longing for belonging. It's baked into our biology to want to connect, and yet there is this chasm, this distance that we have to overcome to feel like we belong, to be met. What would you say to somebody who's struggling with all that?
I would say, how exciting.
Yeah.
How exciting. There's going to be so much growth because you're in this darkness.
Yeah.
And that you bringing this up is a start that you want to get out of it.
Nice.
And life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you, as I've heard you say to me before. And
that's a hard one to swallow, though, because you've got to really step out of victim mode and take responsibility like you did. I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm going to do this. You did that for you. And the minute you do, you become empowered in your own life. Yeah, life is happening for us, even the really hard stuff we're going through right now.
So now it's the hard stuff. Like if somebody were to talk to me about that, it's like, all right, congratulations, how exciting, because you're in for an awesome ride. Believe me, I've been there, I've done that.
And you'll get through it.
And you'll get through it.
You know that quote I love so much, if I must fall, let me fall, for who I will become will catch me. I see you as somebody who took the fall, who has landed and caught himself. Like, you really do have to have this leap of trust in your own ability to show up in your life. Not, we often look at people who do that as being selfish, and the reframe on that is we're being self-full. We're putting ourselves at the center of our attention to heal our inner child. And so there's a question I want you to maybe close your eyes and think about it. How old were you when you lost your innocence? Where you stopped, or you became self-aware and didn't, in that moment, didn't know to love yourself? Like, I think kids don't have that to deal with until a certain thing happens.
Yeah, I'm not different from a lot of kids. My parents divorced when I was 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So that was traumatic. And I always thought there had to be something to do with me that, you know, which of course it wasn't. But
right.
But when you're that young, you think you were part of the problem.
Right.
And then when I was 14 is when I lost my father to cancer. That was tough, and not having a father figure is a hard way to grow up.
Yeah.
And so that was traumatic, and I just remember crying myself to sleep for what seemed like a year every night. It was just so hard. So those were the two.
Those are two big traumatic events.
Useful, yeah.
And if we don't have resources, community, skills around us, to process those events, they become the start of coping mechanisms and separation from community, and we just begin to isolate. And
I remember before my dad died, I was pretty popular in school. I was a jokester. I could make people laugh. There was always the lighter side of everything, and I was a happy-go-lucky kid.
Yeah.
But after that, I just shut down.
Yeah.
I became very quiet.
So you were 12, 14?
14.
To 64.
Yeah.
Right? So 60 years of your life. Well, minus the 5 you've now been on the healing path, right?
Right.
But 50 plus years of your life.
Pretty shut down, pretty quiet.
So we don't even, I just want to make the point, we don't have to have abusive trauma. We don't, trauma is just a natural circumstance of life. Fathers die. Parents get divorced. People get sick. People move away. And as a child, if we don't have a co-regulating influence to help us process those experiences, we become dysregulated in our nervous system. And sometimes people go towards addiction. Sometimes people go towards addiction to things that are high functioning. Some are low functioning. But we step outside of our wholeness. We're fractured. And we're the only ones who can bring ourselves into wholeness. And you did that.
I did that.
You did that. And what's the impact on your boys for you having done that?
Well, my very first night at Grace, after that beautiful invitation from Ed, I sat down with one of the Grace brothers, and he asked me what was wrong, and it was hard for me to share because that was my first night. I wasn't, used to that kind of atmosphere, and I was kind of restrained myself from sharing, and he finally said, "It's okay, brother, just," and I told him a story of, it still gets me, an awful night where I just went off on my son. He was failing in school, and he was hanging around kind of a wrong crowd, smoking a lot of pot, which I don't mind if you're turning in your homework, and because it's, but he was doing his homework, he just wasn't turning it in, and he got caught smoking pot at school, and he said he didn't have any at home, and I went into his room, and of course I figured out, where it would be, and I looked, and there it was. So I sat him down in a chair in the middle of the room and just said things I regret till the day I die. And this Grace brother, this Grace brother says, "Well, you must really love your son." And I'm like, "Did you not hear what I just said? I called him every name in the book. I just degraded him. Awful." And he goes, "Well, if you didn't love your son, you wouldn't have said anything."
You'd have just walked away.
And I was like, I must really love my son then. And so I got to share that story with my son. So I got to share him that graceful moment that I had, where I recognized how much I loved him. But, and
you forgave yourself.
He forgave me.
Okay.
And he started coming up with excuses for me. As no, there's no excuses.
Okay. So I'm just gonna do a little work with you here. Do you believe that you really wanted to hurt your son? No.
No, of course not.
So you were acting out. You were projecting.
I wanted the best for him because.
And you were dealing with it the best you knew how, which was a stern.
And without a father figure in my life to figure out what would Dad have done, because I never saw.
Would you ever do that again?
Oh, hell no.
So you've done the work of knowing better, closing the gap on doing better. So you get to forgive yourself for doing the best you could with the skills and resources you had at the time. And you've done something that a lot of parents don't do. And this is maybe the the crescendo of this conversation, it's really good to go back to your children. I've done it with my adult children too, and said, man, I missed some beats here. I was disconnected. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know how to cope with what was happening in my life, and I was not a present parent. And there are things I wish I could take back, and I would never do them again. And so you get to forgive yourself. That's part of the loving yourself in this shameless healing space.
And it's in the reckoning of the triggers.
Yeah.
You know, what triggers you. If you
right.
see that you're getting triggered, don't react.
Right. Yeah. Take that moment.
Take that moment.
Take a breath.
And why am I feeling triggered?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Analyze it.
Yeah. Triggers are invitations, right?
Yeah.
To slow down, take a breath. We call it.
And that's like another thing. If there's a trigger, it's like, yay, there's something to be learned here,
something
right?
to be learned here.
Instead of getting ticked off and
Yeah.
just being aggressive with it. Yeah. So
You've really flipped the script on
yeah.
on life, haven't you? Challenge, bring it on. Growth medium.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for all your lessons. I've learned so much here.
Yeah. We both
And,
have.
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Kent.
I love you.
I love you too, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. That's exactly what we wanted. Let's